I bet you could run an ETF called 5-day a week capital, right? That just only
This
indexes
is so
companies
good.
that are full time. And like, I bet on an X year time period, they'll outperform for two reasons. One is actually they'll just get more done and be more productive.
Yeah.
And then two is the CEOs and leadership teams that can get to 5-day a week full time and like have that leverage are likely operating better business.
Sam, you are contrarian and investing like this when you're in your pool house right now and not in the office.
Well, hello, Morins. How's the COVID?
The Rona is gone. The Rona has left the building. We are back to normal, sort of.
It's
I'd
so
give
much,
it
so much better.
95% to normal.
You guys actually seemed meaningfully more upbeat. It's almost like Corona's an actual thing.
Once again, dear listeners, we apologize for the last 2 weeks. We were not on our top quality performance.
I will have to say, it's really bad how hard it hits you.
It's our first time.
I mean, I know that, we made it this far. We made it this far. And I realize we're far behind the news on this. But,
by the way, mask mandates are coming back. Did you see that news drop this week?
Really?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. Maybe that will tie into today's theme.
No one's going to listen to that.
No one's going to listen to that. Yeah, I think that ship sailed. But hello, listeners. Welcome to episode number 11 of More or Less. This is the podcast where we take you behind the headlines, around the headlines, inside the headlines, tell you what's really going on from our view out here in the Bay Area. And the Lessins are back in the Bay Area, which is very nice. You can see Sam has that pool house glow that he...
We're disclosing that I work out of the pool house?
Yes. Oh, I think I already did that when you did a CNBC. I already outed you with your...
That's cool.
With your scenery there. But
we're hoping to reduce his tan a little bit going into winter here.
I know. Well, it's a lighting issue. We understand he looks orange and appreciate that feedback and all the other feedback we're getting.
People think I look orange.
It's a little Trumpish, Sam, to be honest.
Well, it's worked for him. I mean, he's
wearing a collared shirt. I just don't know if the world has appreciated. Sam has a new sense of style. He's been wearing collared shirts all the time.
Country club, Sam?
No, it's because I took Lion to baseball camp on Martha's Vineyard and nothing to do for 3 hours. So I walked around and went shopping, and it turns out they only sell collared shirts in Martha's Vineyard.
And we've got several. We also went to Selfridges in London. Ooh. So basically, we bought Sam some clothing. We made it back to the Bay Area. Now we're here with the Morins, who've also made it back to the Bay Area. You guys back to school yet?
And completely overdressed.
We are back to school as of yesterday, and thank the Lord. I think all parents rejoice when school starts again. We get back to routines and schedules, and we are really excited about back to school here.
Yeah. Pro back to school. Thank you, teachers. But, being back here has me thinking a little bit about the state of San Francisco. And I don't know about you guys, but constantly people ask me, how is it out there? The world has collapsed, everything fun, buzzy, interesting, important about the Bay Area has gone away. And there's been a lot of opining on that. But I think this week, I really want to dig into what we're seeing, what's happening with remote work, back to the office, what's happening with tech workers' salaries. There are some reports this week that they're down about 20%. I don't think I'm seeing that, but obviously the market has changed a lot, and you all see that through your companies. So, it's a lot of things converging. And so let's dig into it and fill everyone kind of in on it. Maybe Britt, to you, what do you think? You've been in the Bay Area a long time. What's the vibe now? How's it changed? And what do you think is going to happen?
Well, it's a really good question. And I think it's not just the Bay Area or San Francisco. There are a lot of cities that are still impacted from the post COVID kind of hangover we've been in for many years now. And I think it's most useful to actually compare some mobile phone data that we actually have passed around in our back
Wait,
channel
you're not
to
allowed
prove.
to bring data to this show.
Yeah.
No crack
Once
show.
or twice, I'll bring some data in. Otherwise, it's pure intuition.
What type of seed investor are you?
It's
data?
fair, Sam. It's a really good point. I should really jump into growth stage investing, but there's no one doing that right now. So it felt like the only place to be.
No DCFs allowed.
Are you telling me that data is coming to seed stage because growth is shut down? It's like trickling down, and now we have to look at data.
Oh, dear God.
If you want to, you don't have to. Sam, we all know that you
There
don't
is
prefer
no
data. So listen to this. According to this chart that I'm looking at right now, which has a
I don't show it because
source.
it's so big. Like, according to my chart, I'm looking
Okay,
at.
this was passed around in our back channel group.
We will figure out how to edit this in so that you can see it on video. That'll be
we'll put this on the video.
That'll be our new trick today.
Well, okay, so it's basically comparing New York, LA, San Francisco, Chicago, and Miami, and the mobile phone usage compared to the same period in 2019. Currently now in like mid 2023. And San Francisco's is only at like 27% versus what it was in 2019. I mean, everyone is down across the board, but the next lowest is Chicago at like 45%. And even New York, which ranks the highest, is only at like 65% versus the norm of 2019. So it makes me believe that either we all stopped using our phones as much, which I doubt, or there are just less bodies moving around in these areas. What do you guys think?
Well, I uninstalled TikTok, so that's probably like a 20% of the traffic right there.
Sam, when were you last in San Francisco?
Well, since I haven't been the week we've been home, so I haven't been in a long time.
Sam, let's have coffee in San Francisco tomorrow.
So far.
I don't think you could pay him. But that's really interesting because also we have seen like a pretty big change in the mandates from remote to back to the office, right? I mean, I'm curious what you guys are seeing with your portfolio and other companies. Like companies are saying 3 days a week, 5 days a week. Is that like a keep in mind, or, what's the trend there? Because that is there has been a shift in the big companies changing their policies, but it doesn't look like it's affecting feet on the ground.
I think that there's a tale of two cities here. You've got startups that have made the hard choice to stay remote. I would actually say that's the majority case in the startup world. And then you've got ones that have chosen to be in person. And, I noticed this week also that our friend Adam Mosseri, who runs Instagram, is also back in town, and it sounds like they're going back to the office. And he was talking about on Threads this idea of hotel desks, which I had never actually heard that term before, and asked him to clarify what it meant. I loosely guessed what it meant, but I'd never heard it sort of referred to in this way that was like, everyone knows what this means. And that's something that felt new to me this week.
Dave, are you proposing that we should start a company, Airbnb Desks?
Yes.
No, just call it hotel desks.
No, Sam, we already did this idea. It was called it was called Breather.
Yeah, that we liked it.
It worked. It worked, and then the pandemic just hit.
No, there's a new Breather. What was the one I sent you, Dave, the other day? There is a new one, and a lot of people are using it.
For all you listeners who didn't appreciate this variable lifestyle living Uber for everything era, Breather was you could book like a conference room on demand.
It was great.
It was amazing.
During my first pregnancy, I booked one to take naps in one building over. Second pregnancy, I got a couch in my office. So very...
you literally used it for a breather.
I did, yes.
And I don't think the pandemic didn't kill that one, Dave. That one was already dying before the pandemic. I don't know.
I mean, it was a good business, but we could get into that. But I think here we are, and now corporations are actually having to think about this in a serious way. And I'm hearing this across the board. I'm hearing various things. People are talking about hotel desks. I'm actually been hearing a lot of people talking about that the camera systems that enable hybrid meetings just aren't working.
That's true.
There's a lot of need for innovation. Like that's actually the I'm actually more interested in the idea realm around this, which is that figuring out how to make the hybrid meeting and the hybrid working that is going on actually work is actually something that seems to be missing. We've got sort of the stuff on the one side, which is we know how to work in offices together. Look at us right now. We know how to do a 4-person podcast over the internet now, which I was talking to Britt about the other day. Like she was doing her podcast all in person before the pandemic. And now we've got this world where it is truly hybrid. And how do you do meetings where you don't know who's going to be in and out of the office at any given day?
So I have a few points. One, in terms of hybrid, remember when we tried to do an episode with the two of you together and us remote? Didn't work, right? Like, so even podcasting with 4 people or 2 are in the same versus separate is I think the hotel desk thing is it's funny. I first heard about it in 2005 when I worked at Bain & Company, fresh out of college.
Did they call it hotel desks?
Yeah,
really.
And there was a thing back in the day. Believe it or not, people still had files then. Like right now, who cares? You could just like show up with your laptop, you plug it in. Maybe if you're a snowflake, you have your ergonometric keyboard and you're angry that it's not the right one.
Yeah, your plant, your topiary.
Yeah, whatever. But like in general, like it doesn't matter. Like it's very clear how this would work. But back in the day, like consulting firms would literally be like, okay, you're mostly at clients. You're sometimes here. You each get like a little dolly with like your like file cabinet, and you can move it to whatever desk you're going to work out of that day.
Now it makes sense to me. I actually didn't understand until I realized that this is a consulting firm, and so consultants actually really this was a thing that they were
consultants
sort of
always
bleeding edge.
A few days. I somehow got through my entire Bain & Company career never getting on a plane for work and like just working out of the office. But that was like me skirting the rules. Like the reality is everyone was kind of few days on site, few days in the office. And I gotta say, even in those days, I don't think it worked that well, right? I think it was like really hard for case teams and people to be moving in and out of the office, in different. And I think like interestingly, my take would be, I think 3 days a week is the worst place to be.
Yeah, for sure.
Really, Sam? That's what the information is.
Jess, you might need to fire your intern.
No, but I think it's really hard. Like I think if you're full remote, you can kind of build systems around that. If you're full in the office, totally great, all full on. This 3 day a week thing, which Britt, by the way, it's simple math. Like that accounts for 40% of where the hell are the people in San Francisco if you're only in the office 3 days a week, right? Like, but it's really hard to coordinate. When do you do meetings? Who's in for what? There's no expectations that are easy, right?
Oh, but you can set Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. It's like, I agree, any 3 days.
Ironically, I just got a text message from somebody saying, can I use the office at 2:30? This is just like, it's how we work.
Yeah. Well, this is a good point. So we're a year post-COVID-ish. Companies have sort of made their beds in this a little bit for now. And like, Sam, you think it's not working so well. Dave,
well,
Britt,
I just think it's a compromise. I think that people said 5 days a week, whatever, they're terrified of it, so they won't do it, even though that's actually what they should do. But they're just people are like.
To be clear, it's not what the Bay Area is doing, but it's what the investment banks are doing.
Yeah, I was going to say props to Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs announced this week, right? Goldman Sachs announced this week that they're going to.
That's because they operate real businesses.
Yeah. Like they're actually going to incentivize people 5 days a week.
Binary. So back to some data. Gartner estimates that by the end of 2023, about 40% will still be in hybrid and 10% will be fully remote. So half the workforce, either hybrid or remote. And I just think it's going to take time to play out. Like I actually prefer hybrid, but because of what you're saying, Sam, which is true, like then you always have some people from home and some people in the office. You don't know who's going to do what. And it's always, I'm going to use my favorite word, janky, when you have like people not on the same page there. But I just don't think that it's possible unless you mandate it full time. And I really do think that especially younger workers are going to want to have the option to be remote. For some people, that's all they've known. Like some people in their mid-20s right now, like that might be the only work history they've known. And that's what they want to do, even if that means they have to pursue different types of jobs.
I do think.
Do you guys... Go ahead, Dave, but I'm going to add one question, and yes, true. When you're considering an investment, is their remote or work from home policy a factor in that at all? Like, do you look at that in terms of the type of culture the company's building?
I don't think we do unless like the founders are on different continents or something. I mean, most of the time these are like 2 or 3 person companies when we're funding them. So,
I have a more sophisticated answer to this, which is that
hey, are you calling
Wait,
me
let's
less
let Dave
sophisticated?
answer because I interrupted him.
Well,
Dave, you have the mic.
no, I'm not calling it unsophisticated. It's more that there's nuance here, which is that
Okay.
there are startups which require more in-person collaboration. I think the more atomic the startup, meaning the more atoms are involved, the more you may need to be in person. We've got a hardware company that, they need to be in one warehouse, one factory, building the product that they're working on, and their iteration cycles depend on it, right? You couldn't build that startup with being remote. And so I think that matters. And I think the other thing that matters when you're looking at founding teams is, what's the relationship? How likely is this founding team to break up? Like, that's like one of the things that as a seed investor, you're looking at kind of most critically. Like, the thing that kills most seed companies is actually founder breakups, not the business not working. And so, I think we do actually look at how does the communication method that they use to run the type of company play into the relationship of the founding team and then the rest of the team.
So that's a very nuanced and I think very good answer, Dave. Let me give a silly but serious answers, which is one, I bet that there'd be an appetite right now for a venture fund called 6-day a week or 5-day a week in person. And
Absolutely.
it only funds companies that are in person with an in-person pledge 5 days a week. Like, I actually think they would outperform. I think that like you could literally just start a venture fund and pitch LPs being like, what is our differentiation? It's like, we only fund teams that are in the office 5 days a week, full time.
I think
right?
we just made a request for startups, like Slow Ventures and
I
Offline
would
Ventures
also- I
will invest in
commit
these
to-
companies.
I just think
I
they'll
think
they'll
that's a
eventually.
brilliant idea. Brilliant
I
idea.
think the other thing was I actually would love to see, Britt, maybe you can find some Gartner data on, is I bet you could run an ETF called 5-day a week capital, right? That just only
This
indexes
is so
companies
good.
that are full time. And like, I bet on an X year time period, they'll outperform for two reasons. One is actually they'll just get more done and be more productive.
Yeah.
And then two is the CEOs and leadership teams that can get to 5-day a week full time and like have that leverage are likely operating better business.
Sam, you are you're contrarian and investing like this when you're in your pool house right now and not in the office.
Brett, let's remember that venture capitalists would never invest in the management structure that they use to manage their own
Absolutely
funds.
not.
Oh my God. Let's invest in
Absolutely.
3 CEO-led company that all work from their pool houses.
Look, if everyone were in the pool house, look,
But Sam, I think, is not wrong in terms of the I believe that companies that have maintain a strong in-office culture will perform better.
I think it's highly dependent on the type of work, right? Like, I think there are types of software where, it's actually focus matters, right? Like, actually, here's something on this front. Like, when I left Apple and went to Facebook, the collaboration cultures of the two places were radically different, right? Like, Facebook has these massive warehouse scale buildings that are all open office plan. Apple, everybody has a private space because Steve Jobs believed that when people need to focus, they need to be able to focus. The public areas in Apple are very intentionally designed to create lots of intersections, just like Pixar. It's like famously studied and written about.
Jobs also didn't want anyone seeing anyone else's work.
Well, it depended. Right? I think that is a little bit of a myth. I think that there was much more focus on that creativity requires focus, and being able to close the door and focus, and particularly in engineering, does matter. And so I think there are software engineering companies that can be built remotely, like, quite effectively.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And you obviously have the correct nuanced take on this. And I think the question is just, I think we're talking about early stage startups in particular, where it's very frenetic and things are changing very quickly. Like, you can't just package up tasks and hand them across the transom with a perfect spec and get them back and say, thank you for your perfectly completed task. Let me hand you another perfectly packaged task.
That's a very
and like,
good
I think
point.
that's the thing, is like, if you're a profit machine and everyone's jobs are super well defined, absolutely. Like, go remote, you get cheaper labor, you get access to better talent, it works. But like, that is not how startups work.
It's a really good point. And, to kind of double back on my point that I was trying to make, during building Path, I actually had a few remote employees, which still to this day, I feel awful about how the relationships ended up, because what ended up happening was we had this incredibly creative culture inside the company, and a lot of the in-person creativity created what, people still to this day talk to me about the features that really mattered. Like, that happened from this in-person creative culture. And there were people that were working out of Europe and Texas that constantly felt out of the loop, deeply resentful, like they just weren't in the conversations. And it wasn't because they didn't want to be or that we weren't trying to include them. It's just like, when you're remote and like some pod of people is somewhere interacting in person, they're always just not ambiently in the conversation, and that's going to be a result of things.
Well, I will say, David, if you want to get into inclusiveness and remote cultures, I actually think even in-person cultures, there's a challenge around this, which is, when do you go home? So I think, like, in my experience in Silicon Valley companies, like, a lot of the best decisions, especially when I was in my 20s, and the most important meetings happened at like 9 p.m.
Yeah, no question.
Right? You'd be like working all day long.
Yep.
And so like, we have to figure this out. And at 9 p.m., you get in a room and you figure it the fuck out. And like, guess what? The thing I didn't understand, that at the time, there were a bunch of older people. I was like, where are they? Like, we're trying to do work here, and like, it's 9 p.m. and the decision is now. Like, they're not reachable. I guess they're not part of the decision. And now as a parent, I'm like, oh, they were with their kids.
They were doing bedtime.
Right. And like, and I have more sympathy for it. But at the same time, like, I actually think it's another really interesting thing about, this is why I think potentially really fully remote cultures can work, or asynchronous cultures can create different dynamics and different voices, is like, super intense, we need to move fast and win, right, type things. You're 24/7 on call, and that works if you can be, but it doesn't work if your life doesn't fit that strategy effectively. So I don't know. I think there are many different strategies for how to organize and people to like do great things. I think full remote, if you design around it, can work in some cases and can not work. I think full in-person can. To me, 3 days a week, the hybrid thing seems like a complete fucking clusterfuck. That's a compromise because of where we were and where we want to get to, right? Which is back to full in person in a lot of cases.
Yeah, it's almost like lazy time engineering, right? Like, it's like a...
Oh my
Guys,
goodness.
you're crushing Jess right now. Do you realize this?
Their opinions are worth nothing to me. Wait until they run a newsroom, then they can talk to me. But
to defend Jess,
no, this isn't about the information. It's more just like, I think Sam's right that there are ways to architect time, and I would argue that the gravity that is, holding people, at least the people, the employees, the labor, to wanting to stay hybrid and remote is what you talk about, Sam. Like, the people with families want to be able to design their work time around family and remove the commutes. Like, I think that's the main thing that, like, the pandemic taught everybody, at least that has kids. That,
and I actually think it's a good point, Sam. I've been wondering where we are on this transition, because it is a transition. And the idea that, like, we come out of COVID, 2 weeks later, when it was clear it was safer to go back and we needed answers for our employees, the idea that what we came up with in that email is how our companies and cultures are going to work into the next decade is obviously absurd. So I think that is a good point. It's also true that if I didn't have 3 kids, 6 and under, in a commute, we'd probably have a different policy.
Well, although I think the journal, to kind of play the other side, I think for journalism, like, journalism, you're sending people into the field all the time anyway, right? Like, it's not a job where like most of your employees are supposed to sit at a desk.
Totally, but it's also a job where you learn by doing. And like, I will never forget one of our youngest employees was visiting us in San Francisco and said, "This is the first in-person edit I've had in my life." And I was like, "You mean at the information?" She's like, "No, my entire career."
Mm-hmm.
So I also think, like, I still take really seriously training journalists. Like, if that wasn't a big part of my business, that this would be like a very different conversation. So, but it's a good point. And I think, like, maybe to get to a quick poll, 2 years from now, do you think that the tech world broadly, the world that we touch, we will have more in person or less in person?
More.
Sam, more. Britt, what about you?
I'm voting more Also because there are statistics around what happened with like mental health and community involvement and belonging since 2019, and it is, I mean, everyone I think knows this, but it's totally plummeted down to barely anything. And so I really do think there's going to be a bottom we hit at some point, which forces people to rank the priority of being with other humans over the flexibility of their time, and that will be better for their mental health. And so I think we're going to go back to that framework, but I do think the hours will continue to be flexible. Like, must be in office every day from 10 to 3 or something, so that if you need to pick up your kids from school or whatever, like there are opportunities to do that.
Dave?
My simple answer is more. My request for startups is that I think it's a deeply hybrid world from here on out. I think there are like evolutionary forces at work here. I mean, like this very podcast, like I mentioned earlier, like this was not a thing before the pandemic. And I was doing an interview, like I'm interviewing associates right now. And I looked over at our team on Monday and I was like, why haven't any of these associates interviewed in person yet? And it was not, there was no intentionality behind it. It was this like, oh, well, we just do everything on Zoom, and I think that gravity is super real and it's almost like subconscious at this point. And so I think that there's going to be a need for a lot better, like, I don't know, like even greater, better forms of Zooming and, cameras and
Or remembering the ones
and,
we have. I mean, I've been corresponding with someone lately who loves calling me. And at first I was like, this is a lot of phone calls. And then I was like, this is so efficient.
yeah.
Like, what I can get done in a 2-minute call would span half a day in
Absolutely.
like asynchronous stuff. And this person doesn't like try to get me he just calls and then I'll call him back. And it is beautiful.
I keep asking people to call me and no one calls me.
Oh, I'll call you, Sam.
Call me.
Sam, send your voicemail.
Should we put your number out on the pod?
I don't answer the voicemail. But but like the text and call or the just call, like I say this constantly to people and no one does it, but I wish they did, because it's like I hate the reliance on let's schedule a time, which gets pushed out.
Oh yeah,
the fucking worst, right? By the way, Calendly is also the worst. But
the one thing I agree with you on, Sam, Calendly is the worst.
You also like, I think there's a good one of the social feeds last night served me this like Jamie Dimon, CEO of JP Morgan, like talking to grad school students about work-life balance or how he works or something like that. And I was and his whole thing was like being so intentional with your time. And he just says everyone wastes a bunch of time.
Totally.
And so he was talking about like, he does calls and that's what he does. And now if you're a senior and people have to take your call or whatever, it's a bit easier, but it was kind of refreshing to remember that this is actually how a lot of very high functioning people work. And
this is also a big thing in LA and the Hollywood industry. This is something I learned over the last 10 years working on the outsides of like entertainment and media. Like in LA, it's very common from like 4 to 6 p.m. to not have anything booked in your schedule. And that's just like known as the free time that you're supposed to call people to check in on certain things. And so like you're supposed to be available during that time. But typically you're taking phone calls at the end of your day to coordinate on next steps for things.
If we could go back to the 80s style, let's roll phone calls, I would be thrilled.
Same.
Like if I could have an assistant rolling calls for me,
Same.
That would be amazing.
I'll do 4 to 6. Let's go.
Okay, guys, we're gonna call it. But also,
can we do call-ins into more or less? We should also do that.
Oh, we'll talk about that at the end. Okay, product announcement. Yeah. But when I was like a 22-year-old tech reporter moving to San Francisco, I realized venture capitalists were in their car commuting circa. Let's be serious, like 3:30.
Smart.
And I would just call them. That's how I broke all my news. And there
3:30 is smart, by the way. That's the best time to be on the 280.
And also, not everyone was that smart, but they also they'd pick up because they didn't, they wanted to feel like they were working a little bit. But then there's that one dead zone. So then I would always pause in the dead zone. I'm like, I know exactly where you are.
You're in Hillsborough.
Yeah. So to recap, we've decided that where we are now is not where we're going to end up. There are a lot of things in flux. Big needs we still have around. Actually, I'd love to hear in a sec, Dave, where you think some of the product opportunities are in businesses around like kind of optimizing this place we are. Also, I think we have to like for business leaders and founders who want to constantly improve, we have to improve how we work. And I think like recognizing that, and maybe that just comes with age, is certainly a big unlock I'm trying to experience. But yeah, Dave, where do you think we need to build some things? We have this horrible camera, by the way, in our New York office that like sits in the middle and tries to like figure out where people are.
We've got that. I don't want to slay that company because I think
we're not going to say the name.
I think that they've done a good job. I think they've done as good of a job as they could have before the pandemic. Right? Like I think that was a product that was already in flight. They put together a lot of, 360 cams and
are you guys investors? We just need to check.
We are. Okay. Multi-directional mics. I think that there's a multi-camera video conferencing system that maybe, I don't know, Sam, that 360, the Insta 360,
I love that camera for my sporting adventures.
There's some kind of a thing that exists in this realm where there's like a multi-camera where you get more. I think like what we're actually talking about here is human connection, right? Like whether we're doing hybrid work or the reason why we want to go back to in-office work is like we all just we're humans. We want to connect with other humans. And so moving more communication, over the internet airwaves is that's where this set of products is. It's why we've used Zoom. It's why we, have tried to use all of these things to do this, but they don't totally satisfy the need for connection.
But isn't it interesting that like if you every time you open Zoom now, it's pushing their chat product? Like I feel like Zoom like had this moment where they were like the ones kind of innovating because they did a really nice job with like just quality and connection of like video and whatever. And like they've decided that actually they need to become a messaging product to survive and be differentiated.
Well, Sam,
which is just kind of funny,
in the end, right? The internet's for porn and chat, right?
You had a chat. Sam would agree in the first part.
The chat is also mostly for porn.
I mean, every social communication, whether it's Yahoo, AOL, Facebook, everything becomes chat in the end.
Well, I thought this line I've heard is everything tries to become a bank.
Commerce.
Eventually.
Yeah, I was going to say commerce.
Like maybe chat with a bank.
Bank chat.
Yeah.
Venmo. Literally, that is Venmo. Why isn't this a software solution? Everyone's got an iPhone with a super high quality camera in their pocket. Why isn't it just like a stand that sits next to you, that goes in front of you
turns
and
on
like
all iPhones.
In a meeting and turns on all the iPhones and just like rotates whose mic?
Yeah.
I don't know. The meeting conference to remote thing is a fucking joke. And I feel like it might be a software solution, not a hardware solution.
Yeah, totally.
I don't know that it's a good business though, because I think it would be easily copied by anyone who nails it.
The other thing on one of my former podcasts, I had Charles Duhigg on. He's a productivity expert, and he feels strongly that organizations need to hire chief productivity officers.
Of course he does. He's an organization guy. That's literally his fucking job.
And Brett, you're helping his business right now.
I'm stating
I know
his
what you need
point.
to do to be more productive. Hire me.
Not him. No, that people internally. There should be someone's job, probably outside of the COO, but maybe the COO, whose job is to like literally look at calendars and be like, what meetings are wasted? How do we do this thing smarter? Is it better to do a sprint at the beginning of the day rather than a weekly meeting? Or like, how are people working so that
they can just email Dustin Moskovitz. He will do this for them. This is our second Asana friend plug of the recent episode.
I would pay for a piece of software that looks through an organization's calendars, everyone connects to it, and then just lets me or automatically uses AI just delete meetings. Like, wouldn't that be sweet if it's like...
Or to reorganize the meetings in the right way, or like...
just talk to people. You don't need meetings, right? I mean, I think I don't know. I've never worked in companies with lots of meetings.
I do. I like the AI productivity officer as a business idea, Sam.
I mean, there's a lot of those.
I like the meeting deleter.
There's a lot of these. There's a lot of these. Yeah. There's a whole bunch of these.
What are you talking about?
There's a whole bunch of AI. You plug it into your, you OAuth it into your Google Calendar.
No, but it has to be across the whole organization.
No, that's what it is. Everyone, just like a CRM tool or any of these tools that we all use, You get everyone's calendars connected, and then it uses AI or basic machine learning to kind of
My
optimize time.
problem with that is it doesn't get it. Like, what is the intent? Like
Yeah,
a
for sure.
meeting
That's
is
why
like
it doesn't
a
work.
unit, right? Like, and I think being really clear, and this is the problem with hybrid, like you have to be so crystal clear about the intention of every interaction, and then you have to bucket the ones that need that collaboration and in person, but you also have to bucket the time to figure out what you need and so on and
Yeah,
so
I mean,
forth. So
Jess,
I
this
just
is
think
this is a treatise on exactly where we are in the arc of AI, right? Like, would you
yes.
trust your calendar to TikTok's algorithm? The answer is no.
no. Well, but Dave, here's the thing. I think a lot of the productivity people kind of are too high-minded about it. They come in like, we're gonna organize your time and blah blah blah, and like give meeting feedback. Bullshit. Too much.
To be
Too
clear, I'm not a
complicated.
maxi
I
on
would,
this. I'm just telling you what's going
I
on.
would want, but if you told me there was a service that you kind of Google OAuth or whatever everyone's calendar into, and it just deleted meetings, and then you went to your team and were like, hey, we're running this service that's just going to delete bad meetings. I actually think that merely telling people that was going to happen would make better meetings. Whether or not it was good, you'd be like, oh shit.
What's a bad meeting?
What?
What's a bad meeting?
Status
Whatever the AI
updates. Status
says.
update meeting.
Anything that recurs more than 5 times in a row.
Anything that
without
could be an
agenda.
email.
Yeah. I hate meetings that start by reading data. I'm like,
Wasn't Warren Buffett not ever have meetings scheduled? It's just
Yeah,
on the
for
day
what
that
it's
he wakes
worth-
up, he decides what he's going to do that day.
Well, that's actually my favorite time management framework, which is that people reaching out for meetings usually have a decision to make, or they are trying to work through an idea, and it is happening in the present. By asking for a meeting and then punching it out into the future, you're actually operating on bad information. And so Warren Buffett's whole thing was about information. Like, he's an investor and he wants to be making the best decisions possible on the most current information. And what can happen with meetings is you end up like way off in the future talking about information from the past. And that just means you're operating on bad information. And I think this is actually a really sound principle.
My favorite meeting is our daily editors meeting, where we literally say, what are we hearing? Like, what is the reporting that is happening now?
But this is case in point, Jess. This is case in point. That's a repeating meeting that produces daily, real-time, very present information.
But it's every day, and it's an hour and 15 minutes, right? And like
It's
that,
also a meeting you could sell access to for a whole shitload of money.
Shit ton of money.
I think this is case in point. The type of meeting that I'm talking about is the one where it's like, hey, let's get together for coffee, and then it's like doesn't happen for 3 weeks.
Oh, I don't do those. Yeah.
Well, I think,
but a lot of people do.
The AI deleted it from our calendar.
Let's acknowledge the fact that we all have very weird jobs at this point in our career, and like I don't think a lot of what we're saying is necessarily applicable in a lot of cases. I would say if you told me that I could change the paradigm, Dave, and say there are only 2 options to hang out. One is you can call me right now. 2 is if you schedule a meeting, that meeting will not happen for a lag time of 10 days, right? So there is no scenario where you can meet, right, in the time frame that would help inform an immediate decision. You have to call me live, right? And we will talk about it very quickly live. And I was funny. Like, I had a situation yesterday with an entrepreneur who called me 4 times in one day about a critical thing. We worked through the problem. I was like, we got it done in a day. If it had been like, oh, I need to schedule a meeting to talk about this, it would have been complete fucking disaster. And so I just think I think the problem is the meeting that happens within a few days versus like right now or like someday.
So what's holding back people from using the phone more? Is it just like a cultural thing that people aren't trained on?
So, sorry.
Yes, raise your hand. Yes, I'll call on you. Go.
I have had a long-standing product idea on this that I would love to see built, which is I think the problem is it's status. The problem with calling is you call and it takes like 20 or 30 seconds to know if you're going to get a pickup. And it's actually too slow to initiate and know who's available to call. So if you go back to status messages, what I really have always wanted is an app on my phone that I star contacts that I care about and they star people they care about. And then you just take the accelerometer. It's like, it looks like this person's driving. They're probably available. Or like looks for holes in their calendars. Like, we know they're not scheduled. And just like
that ignores the fact that like there are some people, it doesn't matter what meeting you're in, you will pick up if they call.
That's 100% true. And maybe you can double tap the person to be like, I'm always available.
Too much friction. Like the problem is I think it's like a cultural thing. It's become, I mean, I guess I call people for a living. I'm a journalist, so maybe I approach this differently, but it's sort of like, what's the harm in calling?
Well,
right?
the problem is that it takes like a minute to know whether they're going to pick
I'm
up.
doing email while I'm not like,
But that's why if I had an assistant rolling calls for me, if I had a bot that was like, here's 50 people I want to talk to, and you hit the button and it just fucking phone trees them until someone picks up, and then I get to talk to them, I would
It's
use
not
that.
unreasonable.
Right? Like there's a bunch of ways to solve it, but I literally, for me, I hate sitting there with a ringtone, not knowing. And then
I mean,
now I have to
this
call
was
someone
the best part of the early internet, right?
Wow.
Because of technology constraints, you had to sign online and sign offline, and all of the status was like people were there, they were available,
Yeah.
and you could send them a
AIM
message.
status was the shit.
Yeah, I mean, AIM status, I still to this day believe was the greatest product in the history of the internet. Like, because you knew somebody was there. I always wonder this.
Yeah.
I'm like in bed at night. I'm like, I wonder who's around and wants to talk about what's going on. And there's
Yeah.
nothing in a phone
Well-
today that does that.
Right,
And
so
this
many
is
people
actually what's
tried.
saying mobile broke this, because everyone's like, oh, mobile put everyone online all the time. But what it really happened, if you remember back to those days, is it went from being like, oh, your Facebook thing is green, you're actually there and we can chat. So like your Facebook thing is always fucking green. So I have no idea if you're available.
I really wish
But why
Facebook
hasn't
would
this
shift
worked?
this
'Cause
algorithm.
Didn't Danny Tran
doesn't
and like
work.
Down to Hang and all these apps try to do this?
We did
They
a
were trying
ton of
1,000
this.
days.
at
So many of
Path.
these.
Everybody's done this.
Will it ever
Facebook
work?
did 15 takes
Because
that we
it
didn't
has to be
roll
done
out.
at like the Apple OS level or something, right? It's almost like the opposite of do not disturb.
The sheer number of takes we've done
Yeah.
at Facebook.
I like that. Please
Good,
disturb.
that's an idea.
Please
Ready
disturb.
to chat.
Please disturb.
Yeah, it's like please disturb, only for
disturb.
certain
Please
people.
disturb. I think it's called please disturb.
All right, all of our friends at Apple, please make
Yeah,
please
this may be
disturb.
one of the better ideas we've come up with on the Moral.
All you do is you take that slider of like on off or do not disturb and make it a three-way switch. Please
Please
disturb.
disturb.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, but I also think like you have different levels of please disturb, maybe because
Well, you certainly have different people you want to be disturbed by.
Yeah.
I like
you've
that
got-
it would
you've gotta
auto
create a
set
list.
though, or certain hours of the day. Sort of like do not disturb, I guess. You could put on certain hours of the day, or like I like the idea while you're driving, it goes into auto.
Yeah.
This is a
people
way
have-
better feature than do not disturb on the iPhone. Like this would be amazing.
Yeah, I mean, we all know this. We've said this a few times. Like, there have been like literally 1,000 takes on this, office hours or whatever. And maybe you're right, Britt. I think it's like it has to be pretty big, deep, right? And it has to make it work because you need the density.
This is kind of similar to, I sent an email down to Apple the other day asking for a feature called Dinner Time, which is a feature parents can use to shut all the family's phones down and make everybody
Just
come
the
to
Wi-Fi
dinner,
down.
including the parents, and the kids can do it too. But
My son would definitely do that.
do you, when you see someone has do not disturb on, does it at all change how you interact with them? Like
no,
does it
because I don't
prevent-
think anybody knows how the feature works. And so I just assume that it's just like, well, you know what?
Yeah.
It does actually make me feel like maybe I'm not causing their phone to buzz. So I think I do send a few more
You
messages.
send more.
Yeah.
You send more messages.
Yeah.
Dave texts in bursts, so
Yeah.
his text, it's so fucking annoying when you do have it on vibrate and
It's how
you're
my
in a
brain
real
works.
conversation.
Whatever, you guys.
And it's your husband
okay,
texting.
I like this. Please disturb. We're going to throw a product idea into the ether. Well, let's see what else is cooking. We've got some late breaking Nvidia earnings, folks. So for those of you who are
Is the market gonna
following the
crash?
AI, no, I
it
think
doesn't-
quite the opposite. It looks like
it literally
indeed.
doesn't matter what they report, the stock will go up.
Why is that, Sam?
Because people hear Nvidia earnings and they're like, buy.
Yeah.
Because they earn
Because
something.
A100s
Yeah.
are more
They
valuable
earn.
than gold or Bitcoin right now.
I mean, so I think all our listeners probably know that Nvidia has cornered the market for AI hardware.
No, they
and-
haven't. They have a slight lead for a year.
Well, in the
Cornered
meantime, they're
market.
winning.
Clearly, you're reading the information briefing because this was the question that posed by our
Oh.
AI newsletter. One of the big questions is what's the forecast? And one of the big issues is there's been huge demand and not that much supply,
Wow.
but that
It's
might
really up.
change. But it doesn't look like anytime soon. So another big quarter.
Wow, it's
kind of,
up 11. It's up 11% after hours. That's crazy.
What are you looking at? I'm seeing 8.22%.
I'm seeing 11.71.
Wow, that's a pretty big difference. Google
Yeah,
Finance.
you know,
Robin
it's
Hood.
moving around.
Robin Hood.
The Oh, Robin.
Robinhood, Dave.
Of course,
Robinhood is your go-to stock.
and of course, Robinhood thinks it's up more.
Absolutely. You guys, early investor in Robinhood, I'm with them till they die. Yeah.
You are loyal.
That
Loyal.
may or may not be that long.
Where does the 3% delta
I'm going to
go?
ride it into the sunset, Sam.
We had some big AI funding rounds this week, many of which were broken by the information. We had Hugging Face.
Do we have any?
Yes.
Is there anything with a rational valuation?
No. No. $4 billion for Hugging Face.
How much revenue does
Salesforce.
Hugging Face have?
These are great questions.
Like dollars. They have literally
$7.
But don't worry, Dave, because they also have earnings.
They don't yet have earnings is the problem.
Salesforce.
I'm quoting from John and Amir's piece. The new funding valued the startup at more than 100 times its annualized revenue.
Isn't it more like 1,000 or 10,000 times its annual revenue?
Revenue, forget profit.
Yeah.
We're just, look, again, I think it's kind of fun times. I will say, having not followed it super closely, I do think Nvidia is, at least from announcing things, which could make it more valuable than a 2-year play into the dust, right? As everyone else catches up their hardware, right? And I do some of the stuff they're announcing around cloud and understanding who's buying their stuff, and then thinking about like the networks they can build. Like, if you told me that Nvidia woke up and was building data centers and owning data and doing things that over time can create differentiation, like that would be interesting, right?
But why won't they do that? Like, I would kind of assume they would.
I just think it's harder than it sounds. Like, I think like it's one of those things, like the story is a great story, but it's a hell of a transition from being a hardware manufacturer of things that, again, no doubt.
Well, to be fair, they're not a manufacturer, Sam. They're a designer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
A designer. Fair enough. But like going from being a designer of hardware that we know has a ticking time bomb till everyone else catches up, to like the awesome business vision of vertically integrated stack where we own AI and the data around it and can do differentiated stuff. Great story.
Yeah,
really hard.
I completely agree with that. Like, every single resource has to be being sucked into the sort of central business operation.
And it's just, you need different talent, and that talent's only going to work 3 days a week.
The other thing, Sam, I think you're making this point, but like NVIDIA's hardware is really good if you're training your model from scratch, but that's going to be less where the kind of ball is and what companies will be looking for as they're building on other models and things like that. So whether that's true or not, safe to assume there'll be things like that.
Yeah, but when all the startups have to pivot back to being crypto companies, it turns out you can't be an AI startup. Sam, when are
you going to get? Like, when is that? Like, put us on notice.
Oh yeah, what year is that, Sam?
Crypto podcast.
I'm with Sam on this.
Look, I am steadfast in the critical importance of crypto in the long term, and I think if there's anything that's going to actually disrupt the tech ecosystem in the world, it will come from the crypto side, not the AI side, which just doubles down existing incumbents. The timeline on that, super hard to say, right? Like, it's not now. I can agree with everyone on that, right? We're going to need some change in regulation, specifically, I think, as administrations change up, which is going to happen, right? And some of the regulators turn over, which is going to happen. Coinbase is doing some excellent work around kind of advocacy, which I think is really important. But then the biggest thing is like real world assets / real world use cases. Yeah. I think the good news about crypto, unlike the rest of the startup economy, from my perspective, is that valuations have actually rationalized and almost all the capital's come out, which is good, right? The Johnny come latelys are all gone, right? So if there's one part of the ecosystem which is pricing things rationally and like there's not kind of Johnny come lately capital floating around hitting anything, it is crypto, and that's good. But you still need serious operators to pick up the baton, do kind of have real world impact with the tech, which I think is doable, but it's not easy. And there's no question that we're still in headwind zone.
Well, thank you for that update from the depths of the crypto winter. We appreciate it and look forward to.
Hey, I'm wearing a college t-shirt.
He's like, it's Sam summer and a crypto winter. It's all going well for you over there,
if
Sam.
You would ask me which was more likely, crypto rebounding or Sam wearing a collared shirt, like multiple days of consecutive collared shirt wearing.
In fairness, it is the same collared shirt.
I remember actually, Sam, like 10 years ago when you were like, Guys, I found a new type of fabric. It's like silverescent. It means I can sweat in my clothes and rewear them over and over again without them smelling. And I'm obsessed with it. It's at Lululemon. But like for some reason, I have this memory of you. So nothing has changed in our decade
Sam
plus
has
of friendship.
almost lost some friendships over not washing his gym clothes, but that will be a story for another time. So I think with that, guys, we should bring this episode to a close. Hope it was valuable to all our listeners out there wrestling with remote, in person, how they work.
But should we talk about the new features we're thinking about?
We should. Dave, would you like to introduce those?
Well,
we're putting this out as an idea, and we welcome feedback.
There's two ideas that have been two ideas that have been talked about. One, I put out on Threads this week, just that the thing that I feel like I've been learning about podcasting is that it's super great. You know, the podcast is showing up in conversations every day now. It's just wonderful. It's so cool to hear that from all of you. But at the same time, there's almost no feedback loop. You don't really hear about, what people are thinking. And so one of the things that we're thinking about doing is maybe some kind of a call in, or maybe people can, join in. And I think, Sam, you had an idea called, what are we calling it? Third wheel?
Caller number 9.
Third wheel.
Wait, but Britt had the good name. Britt, do you want to debut your name?
Yeah. We are casting for our next third wheel. So if you want to join the double date between Sam, Dave, Jess, and I, you can be the third wheel. I know it's really the fifth wheel, but it's better branding to call it third. And you can join one of our conversations potentially. So in order to enter, what do they need to do, Sam?
Do we have an email?
You gotta call us. You gotta call us. You gotta call one of us.
Find one of our numbers and call us to submit yourself.
I've had people ask me, can I join the conversation? I've had people ask, can I join the back channel? If these are things that you're interested in, reach out to one of us. If you know us,
only via phone.
If you know us, you know how to get a hold of us.
And just for a hint, the phone number in my email signature is not my real phone number. So that's
you want people to call you and you don't give them the right number.
They need to be intelligent enough to find Sam's real number on the dark.
The other one goes to Open Phone to plug a startup that we're very excited about and invested in.
I do love Open Phone.
Messages that get sent to it, but I'm probably not going to pick it up.
Got it. Okay, so we're going to try this idea. And the idea is that you would come on and you'd share something you believe, and we'd tear it to shreds. No, just kidding. We would openly debate the pros and cons of your idea with a more or less style poll, and we think we'll give you a rebuttal, but we're kind of working on that. So. New products here, lots of new content coming. It's going to be a really busy fall. Thank you guys for listening. Thanks to our back channel. Thanks to all the people who help us put this together. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this show, please leave us a virtual high five by rating it and reviewing it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Find more information about each episode in the show notes and follow us on social media by searching for @MoreOrLess, @DaveMorin, @Lesson, @JLesson, and as for me, I'm @Brit. See you guys next time.